breaking into the bigger picture. Something unusual is building beneath the surface, and by tomorrow, most people will have no idea that the energy around them has already changed. March 14 does not carry a quiet influence. It brings a turning point. Not the kind that announces itself loudly at first, but the kind that changes direction from the inside out. Tomorrow, Mars aligns exactly with the North Node, and in astrology, that combination is rarely passive. Mars is the force that pushes, acts, and moves. The North Node is tied to growth, future direction, and the path that pulls people beyond what feels safe. When those two meet so precisely, the result is not soft reflection. It is movement with purpose. What makes this alignment so intense is that it does not scatter its energy everywhere. It goes straight to the area of life that has been waiting the longest, the place where hesitation has been hiding, the part of you that becomes visible when there are no more distractions left. For some people, that will center around identity. It will bring attention to the face they show the world compared to the self they buried just to be accepted more easily. For others, it will awaken the need for independence, the urge to create something personal, choose a road that is truly theirs, or step away from places they were only meant to pass through will become harder to ignore. And for some, this energy will be felt in the body itself, through discipline, strength, stamina, and the need to reclaim control over how they direct their life force. This is how Mars works when it meets the North Node. It applies pressure to what has been delayed for too long. It stirs the area that has quietly been asking for attention. But every meaningful shift comes with a cost. To move forward in a real way, something usually has to be released. Not through chaos, and not through destruction, but through honesty. This alignment has a way of revealing the private explanation a person has been using to remain still. A lot of people believe they are waiting because circumstances have not lined up yet. But often that is only the surface story. Beneath it is something simpler, comfort with what is familiar. Even when a situation feels restrictive, people can remain attached to it because they know how to survive there. The North Node represents the road ahead, and that road often feels uncertain at first because it has not been lived yet. Mars changes the relationship to that uncertainty. It reduces patience for endless waiting. It pushes people to understand that action often creates the opening they have been waiting for. This does not mean life has to be torn apart overnight. That is not what this energy is asking for. It is asking for maturity. It is asking people to stop protecting the reasons they have been standing still. Stability is not the enemy here. Security is not the enemy either. The real challenge is letting go of the excuse that has made delay feel reasonable. Once that excuse loses its emotional grip, forward motion becomes far less difficult. This influence does not stop at the personal level. The North Node also speaks to collective direction, to where larger groups of people are gradually being pulled over time. So when Mars touches that point, the atmosphere can shift on a wider scale too. The mood becomes more impatient. Tolerance for stagnation weakens. Conversations grow sharper. Long, unresolved matters begin moving toward conclusion. Even the emotional rhythm of the culture can start to feel more charged, as if people are no longer willing to sit inside uncertainty forever. That does not always mean disorder. More often, it means speed. Mars accelerates what has been dragging. It puts pressure on what has been avoided. And when that kind of momentum begins to move through a collective space, even small choices can suddenly matter much more than they seemed to before. When people recognize that energy, they can work with it instead of getting swallowed by the tension it creates. Because what happens around the world often reflects what is quietly happening inside individuals too. The same message keeps growing louder. Staying where you are no longer feels enough. One of the clearest effects of this alignment is a realization that can be simple, but life-changing. You are not necessarily meant to remain in your current place. Something that once felt fixed may now start to feel temporary. A routine, an identity, an environment, or even a role that once seemed permanent may begin to feel more like a stop along the way. Usually, this does not arrive as drama. It arrives as clarity, a calm awareness that this chapter may not be where the story ends. The moment that awareness appears, perception begins to shift. Mars meeting the North Node points attention toward what comes next. And once a person truly senses that there is a future pulling them forward, staying still begins to feel different. Familiarity starts losing some of its comfort. Curiosity begins replacing numbness. The moment someone realizes they are not actually trapped, the space they have been sitting in starts to feel tighter than before. That is where real change often begins. Not with a huge announcement, but with the quiet understanding that there is another road, and that reaching it may be possible. One of the most powerful psychological effects of this alignment is the way it changes the distance between a person and their future. Normally, people place their goals somewhere far away. They imagine that the life they want belongs to another phase, another version of themselves, another time when everything finally makes sense. But Mars changes that relationship. When it activates the North Node, the future stops feeling so far off. The mind begins to pull it closer. What once felt unrealistic starts looking possible. What once seemed years away starts feeling like something that could begin now. That is what makes this energy so interesting. External life does not have to transform first. The same room can remain around you. The same habits can still be there. Nothing visible may look different in the beginning. But internally, time starts rearranging itself. Mars is movement, and movement changes perception. Once action enters the picture, the future stops feeling like an abstract idea somewhere in the distance. It begins to look like a series of real steps already waiting in front of you. And that changes the internal conversation completely. Instead of asking what might happen one day, the mind starts asking what can begin now. That question changes everything. The focus shifts away from trying to mentally reach the final outcome all at once. Instead, attention moves to the next decision, the next action, the next adjustment that brings life into motion. And with that shift comes a completely different emotional tone. Waiting starts to feel heavier than moving. Delay begins to feel more uncomfortable than effort. Even small steps begin to matter, because once momentum starts, it changes the entire relationship a person has with possibility. That is the heart of Mars energy. The future does not only arrive by waiting for time to pass, it begins taking shape the moment someone starts moving toward it. Mars does not spend much energy worshipping perfect timing. It cares about contact, action, and direct engagement with life. It reminds people of something important. Clarity does not always come before movement. Very often, clarity appears because movement has already begun. Sometimes the people who change your life do not arrive with any kind of dramatic entrance. They show up in ordinary moments. A conversation happens. Someone shares an idea in passing. A simple remark lands in your mind and stays there long after the moment is over. That is often how change really begins, not through spectacle but through human connection. One person introduces a possibility you had never considered. Another points toward an opening you did not know existed. A single question can make you pause and realize that the life you have been living may no longer fit the person you are becoming. This influence becomes even stronger around Mars energy because Mars is connected to movement, exchange, and the friction that wakes something up inside us. When Mars joins the North Node, communication becomes sharper and faster. People speak with more honesty. Ideas move quickly from one person to another. The atmosphere feels more alive, more restless, more socially active. Because of that, certain meetings can seem strangely meaningful, even when they begin in the most casual way. A coworker may say something that completely shifts the way you think about your future. A friend might mention a direction you had never seriously explored. Even a brief interaction with someone you barely know can leave behind one sentence that changes your next decision. Sometimes all it takes is one person helping you notice a door you did not even realize was there. That is part of what makes this energy so important. Under Mars, on the North Node, people often become messengers of possibility. Conversations stop being random and start carrying momentum. Ideas travel faster. Encounters begin revealing choices you have not fully seen for yourself yet. What looks like a normal exchange on the surface can quietly become the beginning of a much deeper shift in direction. Many people think growth arrives gently. They imagine it as a slow and peaceful process, something that unfolds through reflection, patience, and careful planning. But the biggest turning points in life usually do not happen that way. Very often, real change begins when something pushes you out of the place where you have become too settled. That is the role Mars plays. Mars does not wait for perfect comfort or complete readiness. It brings urgency. It creates motion. It applies pressure where life has gone stale. And when that force comes together with the North Node, the pressure is no longer random. It becomes purposeful. Suddenly, the movement has meaning. Progress stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like alignment. The world around you begins to encourage action. Stagnant situations start loosening. Conversations become clearer. New options appear, and instead of inviting endless overthinking, they ask for a real response. Growth is not always born from inspiration. Sometimes it begins with discomfort. Sometimes it begins the moment you realize that staying where you are has become harder than moving forward. Mars has a way of bringing that truth to the surface. It shakes up routines that have become too small. It disturbs patterns that no longer support you. It reminds you that life is not meant to remain frozen in one familiar version of itself forever. When that restless energy meets the North Node, it starts working with direction instead of just intensity. The drive becomes focused. The momentum gains a target. Instead of scattering itself in every direction, your energy starts moving towards something that actually matters. And once that happens, life seems to answer back. Possibilities you overlooked before begin to stand out. Certain conversations start carrying weight. Ideas that once felt distant or unrealistic begin stepping into the real world. Destiny rarely reveals itself while you are waiting for the perfect sign. More often, it starts becoming visible after you take a step. That is what Mars on the North Node represents so clearly. It is the meeting point between movement and meaning. It is the moment when your next chapter stops feeling far away and starts feeling close enough to touch. The North Node has always been linked to the symbol of the crossroads. But this is not the dramatic kind of crossroads people imagine in stories. Real crossroads are quieter than that. They happen in everyday life. They appear when continuing down the same road begins to feel heavier than choosing a new one. The North Node represents the path of growth, evolution, and becoming more fully yourself. But on its own, it only points. It does not force action. It is like seeing a distant sign for somewhere important while still remaining exactly where you are. A person can recognize that sign again and again without ever moving toward it. Mars changes the entire feeling of that moment. Mars is the part of us that says, enough. It is the force that makes standing still feel less comfortable than taking a risk. It creates a pressure that turns hesitation into something exhausting, and once that happens, the old path and the new path no longer feel equal. The familiar path offers comfort because it is known. It promises routine. It gives the reassurance of predictability, the sense that tomorrow will repeat what came before. But after a certain point, that same predictability can begin to feel limiting. The safety starts to resemble confinement. The unknown path offers none of that certainty. It asks for courage. It asks for faith. It asks you to move without being guaranteed every outcome in advance, but it also offers something the old path cannot. It offers expansion. People often imagine life-changing moments as something loud and visible. They picture major announcements, dramatic breakthroughs, or obvious milestones that everyone around them can recognize. But when real transformation happens, it is usually much quieter than that. The deepest shifts are often invisible from the outside. Someone lies awake in the middle of the night and realizes they can no longer keep living a life that feels too small. Someone writes a private thought in a journal and, for the first time, tells the truth about what they really want. Someone stands alone with their thoughts and suddenly sees how long they have been doubting their own value. No one sees those moments. There is no applause. There is no audience. And yet those silent realizations often become the beginning of the most powerful changes a person will ever make. That is the kind of transformation Mars can bring when it aligns with the North Node. It is not only about external action, it is also about internal decision. Even when nothing obvious changes right away on the outside, something meaningful may already be changing within. A belief shifts. A decision settles into place. A new direction becomes impossible to ignore. And that is how real transformation often begins. What makes these inner turning points so powerful is that they do not need to announce themselves immediately. Life may look exactly the same at first. The same surroundings, the same habits, the same daily routine. But something inside has moved. And once that happens, the outer world begins responding differently too. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this moment with me. I truly appreciate your time, your presence, and your energy. If this message resonated with you, if it gave words to something you have been feeling, or if it helped you see your path a little more clearly, then I am grateful it found you when it did. And if you enjoy exploring these deeper cosmic patterns with me, please subscribe to Cosmic Signs and join this journey. Your support helps this channel grow, and I would love to have you here for the next message, the next alignment, and the next sign the universe has to reveal. Until next time, trust where life is guiding you, and keep moving toward what is calling your name.